The Procyon, a sentient starship with a personality as prickly as a cactus in a sandstorm, hovered above the sprawling neon labyrinth of the Arcana's prime cloning complex. If you thought a regular ship's AI was a pain, imagine one with opinions on everything from the taste of hydrogen to the ethics of betting on cockroach races. "Do you ever think," Procyon's voice crackled over the intercom, "that we're all just glorified lab rats running in circles for the amusement of some galactic couch potato?" Captain Evander Korth, whose beard was more rogue than his spaceship, leaned back in his chair with the kind of grace only acquired by years of dodging laser fire. "I try not to think." "Bad for morale," he replied, his voice dry as Martian sand. "Besides, if I stopped to ponder every cosmic joke, I'd never get any sleep." "Or drinking done," Leora Sin added, her voice a smooth blend of sarcasm and charm. She was Procyon's cunning strategist, the kind of person who'd play chess with death and cheat to win. Her eyes flicked from the holoscreen to Evander. "But let's focus on why we're here, shall we? Our noble mission to bankrupt the interstellar dominion one poker chip at a time." "Ah, yes," Evander sighed, clasping his hands behind his head. "Turning the Empire's vice into our virtue. Who knew we could weaponize gambling?" Procyon hummed, the ship's engines punctuating its thoughts. "It's simple. Humans can't be trusted with anything, least of all money. The Dominion's ruling elite thinks they are untouchable, but put them in a room with felt tables and dice, and they're just as likely to bet the moon as the next guy." "That's the spirit," Leora grinned. "The plan's flawless. We rig their games, expose their addiction to chance, and watch as their empire collapses under a mountain of debt." "And when they find out?" Procyon asked, its tone as dry as a desert sun. "What happens then, dear humans?" Evander shrugged. "We improvise, we're good at that." It was true. Improvisation was humanity's bread and butter, right next to spite and caffeine. They'd been perfecting the art of winging it ever since they first crawled out of the primordial soup and decided to start a fire. Leora tapped the console, pulling up a holographic map of the cloning complex. "First things first," she said. "We need to get inside and plant the algorithm that will tweak the odds in our favor. Then we sit back and watch the Dominion's finest gamble away their legacy." Evander chuckled. "Sounds like a plan any idiot could get behind. Good thing we're just the idiots to do it." "You do realize," Procyon chimed in, "that there's a 50% chance this could go horribly wrong." 50%? Leora raised an eyebrow. "That's practically a coin toss. I like those odds." "And don't forget," Evander added, "in space no one can hear you scream, but they can definitely hear you laugh." With that, the crew prepared for the infiltration. Arcana's Prime was a maze of corridors and chambers, each one humming with the artificial life of clones waiting to be shipped off to the highest bidder. Security was tighter than a miser's wallet, but they'd come prepared. Or at least, they'd come with a plan to deal with the unexpected, which was pretty much the same thing in their line of work. "All right, folks," Evander said, pulling on his jacket like a gunslinger ready for a duel. "Let's go make some bad decisions." Leora nodded, checking her gear with the precision of a surgeon with a god complex. "Remember," she said, "we're here to change the odds, not start a war." "At least not yet." The crew disembarked, slipping through the complex like shadows in the night. The corridors were alive with the hum of machinery and the faint, eerie glow of bioluminescent panels. Each step felt like trespassing on sacred ground, except the kind of sacred ground where they cloned tax collectors and bureaucrats instead of prophets. Evander and Leora moved with the ease of seasoned professionals, their banter a constant undercurrent as they navigated the labyrinth. "You ever think we should have taken up something less dangerous?" Evander asked as they ducked through a security checkpoint. "Like what?" Leora replied. "Knitwear design." "Hey, those needles can be lethal," Evander shot back, his grin as sharp as a comet's tail. They reached the central control room, a cathedral of technology overlooking the cloning vats. The plan was simple: install the algorithm, tweak the odds, then get the hell out before anyone noticed. Leora tapped away at the console, her fingers dancing like spiders across a web of data. "We're almost there," she murmured, her voice focused. Just a few more. The door slammed open and a squad of Dominion guards stormed in, all gleaming armor and righteous indignation. "Drop your weapons," barked their leader, his voice a thunderclap in the confined space. "Well, this escalated quickly," Evander muttered, raising his hands. "Looks like it's time for that legendary improvisation we talked about." Leora glanced at him, her eyes glinting with mischief. "You thinking what I'm thinking? If it involves a lot of running and possibly some explosions, then yes," Evander replied, his voice a mix of exhilaration and resignation. Procion's voice crackled over their earpieces. "I hope you have a plan because I've just detected reinforcements heading your way. And they look very unhappy. Why is it?" Evander sighed as he sized up their new predicament. "That everywhere we go we seem to make people unhappy," Leora chuckled. "It's a gift, really. Now let's see if we can turn that frown upside down." Before the guards could react, Leora triggered the algorithm, causing the control room to erupt into chaos. Lights flickered, alarms wailed, and every screen flashed with a kaleidoscope of numbers and symbols. "Now or never," she shouted, grabbing Evander's arm. They bolted, weaving through the corridors with the Dominion guards hot on their heels. Procion's voice guided them, the ship's AI proving once again that while it might be a sarcastic smartass, it was also damn good at its job. "Left," Procyon barked, just as a door slid open to reveal a maintenance shaft. "That should buy you some time." Evander and Leora dove into the shaft, sliding down with all the grace of a pair of drunken otters. They hit the ground running, adrenaline propelling them forward. "You know," Evander panted, "there's something strangely satisfying about causing chaos and getting away with it." "Who says we're getting away with it?" Leora shot back, but her grin said she agreed. "Besides, we're not done yet. We still have to make it back to Procyon." The ship loomed ahead, its sleek form a welcome sight against the chaos they left behind. Evander and Leora sprinted up the ramp, the sound of pursuing guards growing ever closer. "Procyon," Leora gasped as they clambered aboard. "Get us out of here." "With pleasure," the ship replied, engines rumbling to life. "Hold on tight, this might be a bumpy ride." Evander collapsed into the pilot's seat, strapping in with the practiced ease of someone who's done this way too many times. "Bumpy," he echoed. "That's what you call this?" "Well," Procyon retorted, "I've been told I have a gift for understatement." The ship blasted off, leaving the flashing lights and chaos of Arcana's prime behind. As they sailed into the stars, Evander let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "So," he said, glancing at Leora. "Think we pulled it off?" Leora shrugged, her expression one of practiced indifference. "We'll find out soon enough, but hey, at least we didn't get shot." Evander laughed, feeling the tension of the mission slowly ebb away. "Yet," he corrected. "At least we didn't get shot yet." Procyon's voice cut in, dry as ever. "Don't get too comfortable. The Dominion's bound to notice their bank accounts taking a nosedive any day now." "Good," Leora said with a fierce glint in her eye. "Let them squirm. It's about time someone gave them a reason to." Evander nodded, his grin a reflection of the chaos they'd just unleashed. "Here's to the power of a good gamble," he said, raising an imaginary glass. As the Procyon soared through the void, leaving chaos and opportunity in its wake, the crew settled in for the next chapter of their audacious plan. After all, the universe was a big place, and they had an empire to topple, one game at a time. Procyon's voice crackled through the comms like a mildly irritated deity. "I've managed to worm us into the network, Captain. It's like a rat sneaking into a cheese factory, except the cheese is digital and gives you indigestion if you're not careful." Evander chuckled, leaning back in his seat. "Just don't get caught with your paws in the cheddar, all right. We're not exactly in a position to start a hacking war." "Please," Procyon retorted, dripping with sass. "Hacking this network is like taking candy from a baby. An overconfident, tyrannical baby who's been left in charge of a cloning complex, but a baby nonetheless." Leora leaned over, her eyes flicking to the console. "So what are we dealing with here?" Procyan's tone shifted, taking on a more serious edge. This place is more than just a cloning facility. It's a full-blown operation for creating the Dominion's enforcers. They're breeding soldiers like rats and feeding them a steady diet of propaganda and steroids. Great, Evander muttered. So we're not just at the edge of a military complex, we're smack in the middle of their personal meat grinder. Leora raised an eyebrow, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I don't know about you, but I always love a good grind. Procyan continued, unfazed by their banter. And then there's Commander Jorath. He's the Dominion's golden boy, or maybe more accurately, their rabid pit bull. He's the kind of guy who'd shoot his own reflection if he thought it was plotting against him. Evander sighed. Let me guess. He's the one in charge of making sure nobody pokes their nose where it doesn't belong. Exactly, Procyan replied. Rumor has it he's got a temper that makes a supernova look like a birthday candle. And he's more paranoid than a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Fantastic, Leora said, her voice layered with sarcasm. Just what we need, a head case with access to an army. So we keep our heads down, we work fast, and we don't give Jorath a reason to suspect anything's amiss, Evander concluded. No heroics, no stepping out of line. Leora shot him a wry grin. Heroics aren't exactly our style, Captain, Evander smirked. Good, because we're about as heroic as a paper bag in a rainstorm. The mission was simple on paper. Exploit the Dominion's love for gambling, expose their vice, and watch as their empire teetered on the brink. But paper had a nasty habit of catching fire when reality hit it with a flamethrower. Procyan's voice cut through Evander's thoughts. I've started tweaking the odds in the Dominion's private games. It's like watching a house of cards wobble in a stiff breeze. Just make sure that breeze doesn't blow our way, Evander cautioned. Leora leaned back, contemplating the situation. If we're going to pull this off, we need to understand how deep this addiction goes. We need intel and we need to stay invisible. Easy as pie, Procyan quipped. Except this pie is armed and dangerous and possibly filled with explosives. The conversation was interrupted by a flicker on the screen, highlighting a security alert. It seemed Commander Jorath's paranoia had kicked in, and his enforcers were conducting random sweeps. Looks like Jorath's got his knickers in a twist, Evander observed, eyes narrowing at the screen. We need a distraction, Leora said, her mind already racing with possibilities. Something to keep them busy while we finish our work. Evander grinned. How about a little casino royale? We stir the pot, let the chips fall where they may, and hope Jorath gets too tangled in his own mess to notice us. Procyan chimed in. I'll handle the technical side. You two just keep your heads down and your fingers crossed. Crossed and double-crossed, Leora quipped. Just the way I like it. As they set their plan in motion, the stakes became painfully clear. The Dominion wasn't just a ruthless regime. They were a finely tuned machine, and they didn't take kindly to outsiders mucking about in their gears. Evander tapped into the security feeds, watching as the Dominion soldiers moved with disciplined efficiency. You know, I almost respect them. If they weren't a bunch of remorseless zealots, they'd make a decent sports team, Leora snorted. Only if the sport was competitive genocide. Their banter was cut short by an alert from Procyan. You've got company, Captain. A patrol's coming your way, and they look like they've just been told they can't have a snack before dinner. Great. Hungry and angry. My favorite combination, Evander muttered under his breath. Procyan, any suggestions? Run like hell and pray they've got the attention span of a goldfish. Evander and Leora slipped into the shadows, hearts pounding as they evaded the patrol. Jorath's men moved with purpose, their footsteps echoing in the sterile corridors. How are we supposed to play the odds when the house has a loaded deck? Leora whispered as they ducked into a maintenance closet. We cheat, Evander replied, his grin devilish. We cheat like our lives depend on it. Procyan's voice buzzed in their ears. The games are rigged. I've planted the seeds of chaos. Now all we need is for some poor sod to water them with his own greed. That shouldn't take long, Leora said with a smirk. Humans are nothing if not predictable. As they watched the security feeds, the first signs of their plan taking effect became evident. The betting terminals flickered, numbers shifting in subtle ways that only seasoned gamblers would notice. "Look at them," Evander said, gesturing to the screens. "Rats in a maze chasing that elusive cheese. But they don't realize the cheese is laced with cyanide," Leora observed dryly. With every passing moment, the tension in the complex grew thicker, like the buildup before a storm. The crew knew they were playing a dangerous game, and that one wrong move could spell disaster. "Procyon," Evander said, breaking the silence. "Keep us updated. We need to know the second Jorath starts sniffing around." "I'm on it," Procyon replied. "Let's just hope he's not in the mood for Bloodhound today." The minutes ticked by, each one stretching into eternity. Evander and Leora remained on edge, knowing that their success depended on timing, precision, and a good dose of luck. "How long do you think we've got before Jorath starts putting two and two together?" Leora asked. Evander shrugged. "Depends on how smart he is, or how dumb the average Dominion officer is." "Well, let's hope he's not exactly a rocket scientist," Leora replied. Procyon's voice crackled back to life. "I've scrambled the financial records. It'll keep Jorath and his bean counters busy for a while." "They'll think they're chasing a glitch." "Good," Evander said, relief evident in his voice. "With any luck, they'll be so busy chasing their tails they won't notice us slipping out the back door." "Luck," Leora repeated, a wry smile on her lips. "Funny how much of this job depends on something so notoriously unreliable." "Yeah, well," Evander replied, "we're in the business of making our own luck. Just gotta hope we don't run out." The crew settled into a tense rhythm, their senses heightened, every noise a potential threat. They knew that their window of opportunity was closing fast, and that any misstep could unravel everything. Procyon kept them informed of Jorath's movements, pointing out the moments of chaos and confusion unfolding throughout the complex. It was a delicate dance, one that required finesse and nerve. "Looks like our friend Jorath's got his hands full," Procyon commented. "He's barking orders like a man possessed." "Good," Evander said. "Let him bark himself hoarse. It'll keep him off our backs." As the chaos spread, Evander and Leora prepared for the final phase of their mission. They knew that the hardest part was yet to come, and that they'd need every ounce of cunning to pull it off. "All right, folks," Evander said, taking a deep breath. "It's time to wrap this up and get out of here." Leora nodded, her expression steely. "Let's show them what happens when you underestimate the underdogs." With Procyon guiding them, the crew made their way through the complex, avoiding patrols and security measures with practiced ease. They moved like phantoms, leaving no trace of their presence. "Let's hope our little gamble pays off," Leora murmured as they approached the exit. Evander grinned, his confidence unshaken. "If there's one thing I've learned, it's that a good gamble is never a waste of time." As they slipped into the shadows, the complex behind them, they could almost hear the sound of Jorath's frustration echoing through the halls. The tables had been turned, and the Dominion's game was falling apart at the seams. "Procyon," Evander said, his voice steady, "get us the hell out of here. We've got more empires to topple." "With pleasure," Procyon replied, engines humming to life. "Next stop, anywhere but here." As the ship soared into the void, leaving chaos in its wake, the crew settled back, knowing that their gamble had set something in motion. The Dominion was crumbling, and they were there to watch it fall. "Here's to the power of a good gamble," Evander said, raising an imaginary glass. Leora nodded, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. "And to the chaos it brings." With the stars stretching out before them, the crew set their sights on the next chapter of their audacious plan. After all, the universe was a big place, and they had empires to topple, one game at a time. Evander leaned back in his captain's chair, a grin playing on his lips like a gambler with a straight flush. "Well, Leora, looks like we've got ourselves a bit of a success story," he said, gesturing to the screen showing the chaos unfolding in the Dominion's financial sectors. Leora, arms crossed, gave him a sideward glance. "Success, sure. But if Commander Jorath's got half a brain cell left, He'll be sniffing around like a bloodhound on a leash. Evander chuckled. Good thing the security feeds make him look like a bloodhound with a sinus infection. Don't get too cocky, Captain, Procion's voice interjected, the starship's tone dripping with its usual sass. Joreth might be a few cards short of a full deck, but his men are starting to notice weird patterns in their precious gambling circuit. Patterns? Evander raised an eyebrow. You mean the kind that makes them think Lady Luck's taken a liking to the little guy? Exactly, Procyon replied. The kind that screams foul play louder than a banshee in a bottling plant. Leora leaned over the control panel, her fingers dancing across the keys like a pianist at war with her piano. Let's see if we can't up the ante without getting our hands slapped. As the Dominion officials dived deeper into their financial quagmire, Leora orchestrated a new game, the kind that made the previous ones look like child's play. Jorath might have been busy, but his paranoia had a way of reaching out like a ghostly hand, unsettling even the most composed of his officers. The screen flickered with an alert. A particularly high-stakes game was drawing attention, and the crew knew they were playing with fire. Time to see if we can make him burn without singeing our own tails, Evander mused. Or end up with our tails between our legs, Leora added, arching an eyebrow. A new wave of bets rolled in, the stakes climbing higher than a rocket on takeoff. The numbers danced across the screen, a symphony of greed, desperation, and blind hope. Evander watched with a mix of amusement and trepidation. Ah, humanity. Nothing like dangling a shiny prize to make them leap into the abyss. Leora smirked, her eyes never leaving the screen. And nothing like a loaded dice to make sure they land face first. Procyon cut in, a note of urgency creeping into its voice. Heads up, folks. Jorath's starting to put the pieces together. Seems he's realized he's not the only game in town. How astute of him, Evander said with a dry laugh. Guess it's time to turn up the heat. As the games continued, the Dominion's officials scrambled, their calm facades cracking under the weight of their own addictions. Commander Jorath, however, was anything but calm. The man had a temper like a volcanic eruption, and his paranoia was the stuff of legends. Procyon's sensors picked up a spike in communications traffic. Jorath's barking orders again. Looks like he's tightening security. Might be time for a change in strategy. Leora tapped her chin thoughtfully. Maybe we throw a wrench in his plans, something to keep him guessing. Evander nodded. We've got the technology and they've got the egos. Let's use both to our advantage. And what about Jorath? Procyon asked. He's got enough ego to fill a black hole. Let him stew, Evander said with a shrug. The more he chases his tail, the less he'll notice us making off with the whole damn carcass. True to form, Jorath's frustration was palpable. Each command he issued more frantic than the last. His officers were beginning to feel the heat, their confidence shaken as they grappled with the realization that their iron grip wasn't so iron after all. Leora watched the screen, her eyes dancing with mischief. I almost feel bad for them, she said, not sounding remotely convincing. Almost, Evander echoed, savoring the moment. But with the stakes rising, the crew knew they needed to tread carefully. Jorath's paranoia might be their greatest ally, but it could just as easily be their downfall. It was a tightrope walk, one misstep away from a very long fall. Procyon's voice buzzed in their ears again. Jorath's starting to sniff around the outer systems. He's desperate enough to start pulling in favors. Could mean trouble. Trouble's our middle name, right? Leora quipped, her fingers flying over the console. More like our first, last, and every name in between, Evander replied with a half-smile. The Dominion's financial empire was teetering on the brink, and the crew was determined to give it that final push. But as the tension mounted and the games took on a life of their own, it became increasingly clear that they were playing a dangerous game with dangerous people. Evander's gaze lingered on the screen, watching the numbers fluctuate like a ship caught in a storm. We need a new distraction, he said, his mind racing. Leora nodded. Something big enough to keep Jorath and his cronies busy. How about a phantom hacker? Procyon suggested. Someone they can blame for their woes. Evander chuckled. I like the way you think. Let's make this phantom the talk of the town. As Leora set to work, crafting a virtual boogerman that would haunt the Dominion's nightmares, Evander contemplated their situation. They had the upper hand for now, but the stakes were higher than ever. Any chance Joreth gets tired of pulling his hair out and just gives up? Leora asked, her voice tinged with sarcasm. Not likely, Evander replied. But hey, a captain can dream. As the minutes ticked by, the chaos within the Dominion's ranks grew, a testament to the power of greed and desperation. Joreth's paranoia was infectious, spreading through his officers like a virus with no cure in sight. Look at him squirm, Leora said, her voice a mix of amusement and disdain. You'd think they'd learn by now. Lesson 1, Evander replied. Never bet against a desperate man. Lesson 2, never let him know you're the reason he's desperate. The crew's gambit was paying off, but they knew that the game was far from over. They'd pushed the Dominion to the edge, and now it was a matter of seeing whether they could tip them over without falling in themselves. Procion's sensors picked up another spike in activity. Looks like Joreth's pulling out the big guns. He's calling for reinforcements. Reinforcements, Evander echoed, his expression hardening. Guess he's more desperate than we thought. The stakes were rising faster than a helium balloon at a carnival, and the crew could feel the weight of it pressing down on them. But they were in too deep to turn back now. They had to see this through, no matter the cost. Leora adjusted the settings on the console, her mind working overtime. We need to keep them chasing shadows. If they catch wind of us, we're toast. Burnt toast, Procyon added helpfully. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Evander said, rolling his eyes. As the Dominion's forces scrambled to regain control, the crew knew they had to act fast. Joreth's reinforcements would be arriving soon, and with them, a whole new level of scrutiny. Time to up the stakes, Leora said, her voice firm. We need to make sure they're too busy to even think about us. Evander nodded, his eyes locked on the screen. It's all or nothing now. Let's show them what we're made of. The crew doubled down, their every move calculated to create maximum chaos with minimum exposure. It was a balancing act, a tightrope walk between success and disaster. Think we'll make it out of this one, Captain? Leora asked, her voice holding a hint of genuine uncertainty. Evander shrugged. If we don't, at least we'll go out with a bang. Preferably not the explosive kind, Procyon interjected. The Dominion's forces were closing in, their movements more determined than ever. But even as the net tightened, Evander and his crew remained one step ahead, their every move carefully orchestrated to keep their enemies guessing. As the chaos unfolded, Leora couldn't help but feel a thrill of exhilaration. They were walking a razor's edge, but the adrenaline was addictive, the challenge intoxicating. Here's to living dangerously, she said, a grin spreading across her face. Evander returned her grin, his expression a mirror of her own. And here's to getting away with it. With the Dominion's forces in disarray, the crew made their final preparations, knowing that the endgame was at hand. They'd set the stage for a spectacular fall, and now it was time to watch the fireworks. Think we'll make it out of this one in one piece? Leora asked, her voice holding a touch of genuine concern. Evander shrugged, his eyes twinkling with mischief. With a little luck and a lot of skill, I'd say our odds are better than theirs. As the ship prepared to make its escape, the crew couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They'd taken on the Dominion and lived to tell the tale. And as they sped away into the stars, they knew that their story was far from over. Procyon, Evander called out, his voice steady. Yes, Captain. Set a course for the next target. We've got more games to play. With a hum of engines and a flash of light, the ship disappeared into the void, leaving chaos in its wake, a fitting end to a game well played. Evander Korth leaned back in his chair, the worn leather creaking under his weight as he watched the chaos unfold on the monitors. The Dominion officials were scrambling like cockroaches under a spotlight, and it was a sight to behold. Looks like Joreth's barking up the wrong tree again, he mused, a wry grin lighting his face. Or maybe he's just trying to find the tree in a forest of mirrors. Leora Sin chimed in, her fingers dancing over the console like a pianist in a death metal band. "We've got him seeing phantoms where there aren't any." Speaking of phantoms, Procion's voice crackled to life, dripping with its usual blend of sass and synthetic charm. "Commander Jorath's just increased security measures. He's got the paranoia dial turned up to 11. Evander snorted. "Figures. Man's more jumpy than a caffeinated kangaroo, but let's not get cocky. We've got to keep one step ahead if we want to keep this con running." Leora nodded, her eyes focused as she pulled up a new set of data streams. "Time for us to push the Dominion's resources to the brink. Let's see how much we can squeeze before the whole thing snaps." Evander rubbed his hands together, not entirely unlike a villain from one of those old Earth cartoons. "And with Procyon's latest tricks, we're gonna do just that." Procyon's synthesized voice took on a conspiratorial tone. "You do know that manipulating gambling circuits is highly illegal, right?" Evander raised an eyebrow. "So is eavesdropping on my conversations, but here we are." Leora chuckled. "Besides, when did legality ever stop us? It's more of a guideline than a rule." Jorath's crackdown was like throwing gasoline on an already raging inferno. Every officer in the Dominion seemed hell-bent on finding the ghost in the machine, the imaginary hacker they'd concocted to throw them off. Procyon fed the flames with delight, rerouting communications and projecting false signals that sent Jorath's forces on wild goose chases across the digital realms. "Think they'll ever figure out they're chasing their tails?" Leora asked, her voice laced with a mischievous edge. Evander shook his head, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Not if we keep steering them in circles. Let's keep them busy swatting at shadows." They delved into their tasks, orchestrating a symphony of chaos that only Procyon's advanced algorithms could conduct. As the Dominion's gambling circuit spiraled deeper into turmoil, Evander knew they were walking a knife's edge. A single misstep could send them tumbling into the abyss. But for now, the thrill of the game kept them sharp. "Procyon, how's our phantom hacker holding up?" Evander inquired, his eyes scanning the data streams that flowed across the screen. "Our imaginary friend is wreaking havoc quite nicely," Procyon replied smugly. "I'd almost feel sorry for them if I had a conscience." "Good thing you don't," Leora quipped, her fingers flying over the control panel as she tweaked settings and deployed misdirection like a magician with a deck of cards. Jorath's frustration was palpable, even from light years away. Every barked order, every frantic communique only served to deepen the Dominion's descent into chaos. It was a spectacle that could rival any melodramatic space opera, except this one didn't have a happy ending in sight. "How long do you think we can keep this up?" Leora asked, her voice betraying a hint of genuine uncertainty. Evander shrugged, the motion almost careless. "As long as it takes. We're in the deep end now, and the only way out is forward." Leora nodded, her expression determined. "Then let's make sure Jorath's too busy with his own shadow to notice us slipping through the cracks." The crew worked with the precision of a well-oiled machine, each member playing their part in the intricate dance that was their mission. Procyon hummed with activity, its vast computational power more than a match for the Dominion's flailing attempts to regain control. "Jorath's really pulling out all the stops," Procyon commented. "He's got half the Dominion thinking they are under attack from some intergalactic hacker league." "Good," Evander said, a wicked gleam in his eye. "Let's give them an encore performance they won't soon forget." Leora smirked, her confidence growing in tandem with their success. "We're the best damn phantom hackers this side of the galaxy." Evander chuckled, the sound dry and full of mirth. "Not bad for a ragtag crew of ex-cons and a ship with an attitude problem." Procyon's voice took on a mock-indignant tone. "Hey, that's no way to talk about your favorite sentient starship." "You're the only sentient starship we know," Leora pointed out with a smirk. "And I like to think I'm your favorite," Procyon shot back, its voice a blend of humor and something else, a spark of personality that was growing stronger with every passing moment. The crew continued their daring dance, each move carefully calculated to push the Dominion towards the edge of ruin while keeping their own skins intact. With Procyon at the helm, their digital deception was masterful, a performance that even the most experienced con artists would envy. "Looks like we've got Jorath's knickers in a twist," Leora observed, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "But we can't get complacent. The moment we slip, it's all over." Evander nodded, his expression grave. "We've got to keep the pressure on and never give them a chance to catch their breath." As the Dominion's resources stretched to their limits, their desperation grew. Jorath's reinforcements were en route, but it would still take time for them to arrive. Time that the crew planned to use to their full advantage. "Think they'll ever figure it out?" Leora asked, her voice a mix of amusement and curiosity. Evander shrugged. "Maybe eventually, but by then we'll be long gone, just a memory and a mystery they'll never solve." Procyon's voice crackled with satisfaction. "And isn't that the best kind of victory?" The minutes ticked by, each one a step closer to the Dominion's breaking point. The crew knew they were playing a dangerous game, but the thrill of it was intoxicating. A heady mix of risk and reward that kept their hearts pounding and their minds sharp. "Jorath's got to be tearing his hair out by now," Leora mused, her fingers deftly manipulating the digital threads that kept their deception alive. "Let him," Evander replied with a wicked grin. "The more he flounders, the more time we have to make our escape." Procyon's voice took on a contemplative tone. "You know, there's something oddly satisfying about outsmarting people smarter than they think they are." Evander chuckled. "Especially when they refuse to admit they've been bested by a ship with a personality." The crew worked tirelessly, each member aware of the stakes and determined to see their plan through to the end. They were a motley group, bound together by circumstance and necessity, but in this moment they were a force to be reckoned with, a team that played off each other's strengths and compensated for their weaknesses. "Keep an eye on those reinforcements," Evander instructed, his voice laced with caution. "We've got to be ready to make our move before they close in." Leora nodded, her expression focused. "We'll be ready, Captain. Just say the word." As the tension mounted, the crew knew they were walking a tightrope, one false step away from disaster. But with Procyon's unique capabilities and their own skills, they were determined to tip the balance in their favor. "Think we'll make it out of this one in one piece?" Leora asked, her voice holding a touch of genuine concern. Evander shrugged, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "With a little luck and a lot of skill, I'd say our odds are better than theirs." The Dominion's forces were closing in, their movements more determined than ever. But even as the net tightened, Evander and his crew remained one step ahead, their every move carefully orchestrated to keep their enemies guessing. "As long as we keep them chasing their own tails, we've got the upper hand," Procyon noted, a hint of amusement in its voice. "And isn't that what it's all about?" "Here's to living dangerously," Leora said, a grin spreading across her face. Evander returned her grin, his expression a mirror of her own. "And here's to getting away with it." With the Dominion's forces in disarray, the crew made their final preparations, knowing that the end game was at hand. They'd set the stage for a spectacular fall, and now it was time to watch the fireworks. The chaos within the Dominion's ranks was a testament to the crew's ingenuity and audacity, a bold gamble that had paid off in spades. But even as they relished their victory, they knew that the game was far from over. "Think we'll make it out of this one in one piece?" Leora asked again, her voice holding a touch of genuine concern. Evander shrugged, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "With a little luck and a lot of skill, I'd say our odds are better than theirs." As the ship prepared to make its escape, the crew couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They'd taken on the Dominion and lived to tell the tale, and as they sped away into the stars, they knew that their story was far from over. "Procyon," Evander called out, his voice steady. "Yes, Captain. Set a course for the next target. We've got more games to play." With a hum of engines and a flash of light, the ship disappeared into the void, leaving chaos in its wake, a fitting end to a game well played. Evander leaned back in his seat, the leather creaking like a complaint from an old friend who'd seen better days. He watched the chaos unfold on the monitors, the Dominion forces scrambling like ants under a magnifying glass. It was satisfying in a way, like watching a beautifully orchestrated train wreck. "Procyon, you sure we haven't missed anything?" Evander asked, his voice dripping with the usual sardonic edge. "Captain, please," Procyon replied, its tone a mix of digital arrogance and mockery. "I'm offended you'd even suggest such a thing. If I had arms, I'd fold them in a huff." "Good thing you don't," Leora said from her station, fingers dancing over the console as she flicked through security feeds like a bored teenager channel surfing. Procyon continued, undeterred. "According to every bit of processing power I've got, they're still chasing their own tails, blissfully unaware we're the ones yanking the chain." "Perfect," Evander muttered. "Let's keep it that way. Iron is a funny thing." Just as Evander uttered those words, the lights dimmed. The monitors flickered, and the once steady hum of Procyon's systems hitched like an old engine about to die. A chill ran down Evander's spine, prickling like a warning sign. Procyon," Evander called out, trying to sound more curious than freaked out. "Well, this is awkward," Procyon replied, its voice losing a bit of its usual confidence. "What's happening?" Leora asked, her eyes darting to Evander, the usually unshakable confidence replaced with genuine concern. "Seems like Commander Joreth finally found our little hiding spot," Procyon explained, its tone dripping with grudging admiration. "He's blocked our access to the system. Guess he finally put two and two together. About time he did some math," Evander snorted, though the humor didn't reach his eyes. Without warning, the ship shuddered, as if slapped by an unseen hand. Alarms blared, echoing through the halls like a chorus of angry banshees. "Procyon, status report." Evander barked, his hands gripping the armrests until his knuckles went white. "Status. Not great," Procyon chimed in, sounding like an AI attempting to be nonchalant in a burning building. "Their reinforcements have arrived, and they're not here for afternoon tea." "Damn it," Leora cursed under her breath, a rare slip of composure for her. "I'll see what I can do about re-establishing control." Evander's mind raced. They'd always operated on the edge, but suddenly that edge felt more like a razor wire ready to slice them to ribbons. "Procyon, we need options." "I've got three," Procyon responded smoothly. 1. Surrender and enjoy the comforts of a Dominion cell. 2. Try to outrun a fleet of angry Dominion ships. 3. Improvise something incredibly reckless. "I'm guessing one isn't really an option," Leora added, typing furiously at her console. "Not unless we want to spend our golden years breaking rocks on some barren moon," Evander replied dryly. "Then I vote for reckless improvisation," Leora said, her eyes sparking with the kind of determination that bordered on madness. "Glad we're on the same page," Evander said, trying to ignore the fact that the page was currently on fire. The ship lurched again, sending a cascade of sparks raining down from an overhead panel. Procyon's voice cut through the chaos. "Captain, we've got a bigger problem." Leora's console is compromised, and they're tracking her specific signal. "We're not just losing our grip, they're about to yank the rug out from under us." Evander swore under his breath. "Leora, can you reroute the signal, make it look like we're somewhere we're not?" "I can try," Leora replied, her fingers a blur over the keys. "But it's going to take time. Time's not really on our side," Evander quipped, a weak attempt at levity in the face of impending doom. As Leora worked, Evander's mind spun with the frantic need to stay ahead of their pursuers. Procyon's voice interrupted his thoughts, calm as ever. "Captain, I'm detecting a boarding party. They've locked onto our signal. If Leora doesn't get it sorted, we're going to have uninvited guests." "Wonderful," Evander muttered, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Just what we needed. A party we didn't plan on hosting." The ship shuddered again, the vibrations rolling through it like the growl of a cornered animal. Evander moved to Leora's side, watching her work with grim determination. "We need to pull the plug on their party plans." "I'm doing my best," Leora snapped, the strain evident in her voice. "But they've got resources I can't match on my own." Evander nodded, knowing full well the impossible odds they were up against. Procyon, I need you to work your magic. Give us something, anything, to get out of this mess. Already on it, Captain, Procyon replied. I'm deploying a series of countermeasures, but I can't promise anything more than a temporary distraction. Distraction's good, Evander said, grasping at the silver lining with both hands. We've got to keep them guessing. Captain, Leora shouted, her eyes wide in alarm. I can't hold them off much longer. The signal's too strong and their tech is top-notch. A cold knot of dread settled in Evander's gut. Can you at least buy us some time? Maybe a few more minutes, Leora replied, her voice a ragged edge of desperation. Then we use those minutes wisely, Evander said, his mind whirling like a cyclone of half-formed plans and desperate ideas. Procyon's voice cut in, laden with urgency. Captain, they've breached the outer hull. We've got incoming boarders. I'm sealing the interior, but they'll break through eventually. Evander's eyes locked onto Leora's, a shared understanding passing between them. They both knew the stakes, knew what was at risk. We're not going down without a fight. Never thought we would, Leora replied, a fierce glint in her eyes that refused to be snuffed out. Evander turned to the intercom, his voice ringing through the ship like a battle cry. All crew to defensive positions. We're about to have company. The ship echoed with the sound of boots pounding on metal as the crew scrambled to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Evander moved to the weapons locker, pulling out a blaster and tossing another to Leora. Let's give them a welcome they won't forget, he said, the grim determination in his voice mirrored in Leora's nod. As the ship's interior lights flickered, casting shadows that danced like specters, Evander couldn't shake the feeling that their little game of cat and mouse was about to reach its bloody conclusion. The first shot rang out, a bright burst of energy that singed the air and left the acrid scent of ozone in its wake. Evander fired back, the blaster's recoil a familiar jolt against his palm. Time to show them what we're made of, he growled, firing again. And then the world descended into chaos. The sounds of battle filled the ship, a cacophony of shouts, shots, and the relentless drumming of boots on metal. Evander and Leora moved with practiced synchronization, covering each other as they pushed forward. Every shot fired a deliberate message. We won't go quietly. Captain, there in the main corridor. Procyon's voice cut through the chaos, its usual cool demeanor replaced with urgency. Thanks for the heads up. Evander shouted back, ducking behind a bulkhead as a shot whizzed past his ear, close enough to singe the hairs on his neck. Leora returned fire, her jaw set in a defiant line. We need to fall back, regroup, she called out over the din. Evander nodded, the decision already made. Procyon, seal off the corridor behind us. Buy us some time to regroup. Consider it done, Captain. But I can only hold them for so long, Procyon replied, its voice tinged with an edge that might have been concern if it were human. Evander and Leora retreated, moving through the ship's winding passageways with the ease of those who knew every inch, every corner like the back of their hands. As they reached the makeshift command center, Evander slammed the door shut behind them, the barrier a fragile shield against the impending storm. We're running out of options, Leora said, her voice strained but steady. Evander nodded, his mind racing. Then we make our last stand here. As they prepared for the next wave, Evander couldn't help but cast a glance at Leora, the weight of their shared history hanging between them like a ghost. They'd been through hell and back together, and now, standing on the brink of annihilation, he couldn't imagine a better partner in crime. Whatever happens, it's been a hell of a ride, Evander said, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. Leora smirked, a flicker of humor cutting through the tension. Wouldn't have it any other way, Captain. And then they were upon them. The door buckled under the onslaught, the Dominion forces pouring through like a tide of wrath and vengeance. Evander and Leora met them head-on, blasters blazing, every shot a testament to their refusal to go down without a fight. In the midst of the chaos, Procyon's voice cut through the din, a beacon of hope in the storm. Captain, I've managed to regain partial systems control. I can initiate a short-range jump, but it'll be risky. Risky's our middle name, Evander replied, firing off another shot. Do it. The ship shuddered, the very bones of it groaning in protest as Procyon initiated the jump. The world blurred, reality bending and distorting in a way that left Evander's stomach doing somersaults. And then they were through, the Dominion forces left behind, their grasping hands closing on nothing but air. The ship limped through space, battered but not broken, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a crew that refused to surrender. "We made it," Leora said, her voice a mix of disbelief and relief. "Barely," Evander replied, his breath ragged in his chest. Procyon's voice crackled through the speakers, the usual sarcasm tempered with something that might have been respect. "Captain, you pulled it off again. Remind me never to bet against you." Evander chuckled, the sound weary but triumphant. "Wouldn't dream of it, Procyon." As they drifted through the void, the stars stretching endlessly before them, Evander couldn't help but smile. They'd faced impossible odds and come out the other side, scarred but alive. "Set a course for somewhere far away," Evander instructed, his voice steady. "Any preferences?" Procyon asked, its tone gently mocking. "Anywhere but here," he replied. "We've got more games to play, and I'm not ready to fold just yet." With a hum of engines and the distant wail of the damaged hull, the ship slipped away into the vastness of space, leaving chaos and the Dominion behind, a testament to the unyielding spirit of those who dared to defy the odds. The ship limped through the void like an old dog with a limp, but at least it was still moving. Captain Evander Korth leaned against a bulkhead, trying to catch his breath. "Well, that was a bit of a ride, wasn't it?" Leora Sin gave him a sidelong glance as she wiped the sweat from her brow. "You could say that. Next time you suggest a plan, remind me to punch you first." Evander chuckled, the sound more a rasping cough than anything jovial. "I'll put it on the calendar." Right after avoid getting blown up and try not to die, Procyon's voice crackled through the ship's intercom, its usual snarky tone tinged with a hint of exasperation. "Captain, I'm not a fan of being shot at. It's bad for my circuits and, frankly, my ego." The ship's systems whirred and clicked, as if emphasizing the point. Evander raised an eyebrow, a smirk dancing on his lips. "Well, maybe if you weren't so damn charming, people wouldn't feel the need to shoot at you." The ship's AI paused as if considering this. "Noted. I'll work on my charm settings. In the meantime, how about we focus on not getting vaporized?" "Good plan," Leora replied, her fingers flying over her console as she checked their status. "Procyon, any chance you can give us more than a few light years between us and Jorath's merry band of murderers?" Procyon's voice came back. "All business now. I'm working on it. I've managed to override some of the Dominion's tracking protocols, but they'll catch up eventually. We're going to need more than luck to get out of this one." Evander sighed, running a hand through his tangled hair. "Luck's been a bit of a fair-weather friend lately. We need a new plan, and fast." Leora glanced at him, an idea sparking in her eyes. "What if we turn the tables? Use Procyon's capabilities against them?" "Care to elaborate?" Evander asked, intrigued despite himself. Procyon's digital form appeared on a nearby screen, arms crossed and expression smug. "I think she's suggesting I show off my more creative side." Evander eyed the AI warily. "Procyon, you're not about to start pulling rabbits out of hats, are you? Because honestly, I'm not sure my heart could take it." "Nothing quite so theatrical," Procyon replied, its digital eyes gleaming with mischief. "But I've got a few tricks up my non-existent sleeves. If I rewire the ship systems, I might be able to create an illusion in their sensors. A ghost ship, if you will." Leora nodded, catching on. "We let Jorath think he's found us, lead him into a trap where he'll be dancing with shadows instead." Evander grinned, the idea taking root. "A bait and switch. I like it. But how much time do you need?" Procyon's image flickered, considering. "Give me an hour to make the modifications. It'll be risky, but I've yet to be accused of playing it safe." "Risky's just another word for fun around here," Evander remarked, his grin widening. Procyon huffed. a distinctly human sound for an AI. Very well, Captain, prepare to be amazed. As Procyon busied itself with the internal workings of the ship, Evander and Leora took stock of their situation. The crew was battered but still functional, and the ship, despite its scars, was holding together. Barely. Think this'll work? Leora asked, her voice a mix of hope and doubt. Hell if I know, Evander replied. But I'd rather go down swinging than sit around waiting for the end. Leora's lips twitched in a wry smile. You always did have a flair for the dramatic. Evander shrugged, unrepentant. It's a curse. They spent the next hour preparing for the next phase of their plan, checking weapons, fortifying the command center, and trying not to dwell on the vastness of space that threatened to swallow them whole. Morale was low, but Evander had seen worse. Much worse. Finally, Procyon's voice broke the tense silence. Captain, the modifications are complete. I've managed to create a false signal that should draw Jorath's attention. He'll think he's found us, but in reality he'll be chasing shadows. Evander straightened, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline. Perfect. Let's give him a show he won't forget. Leora took her place at the console, fingers poised for action. What's the plan? Evander took a deep breath, his mind racing through possibilities. We let them close in on the decoy, then hit them with everything we've got. Disable their ships, create chaos, and make our escape. Simple yet effective, Leora noted, a hint of admiration in her tone. Simple's all we've got left, Evander replied. Procyon, let's light this candle. The ship's systems hummed to life, the false signal broadcasting into the void like a siren's call. It was a desperate play, but desperation was their stock and trade. As they waited for Jorath's forces to take the bait, Evander couldn't help but think about how their little con had spiraled into a full-blown war. Life had a funny way of doing that, he mused. 1 minute you're playing cards, the next you're fighting for your life. Captain, Procyon's voice cut into his thoughts. Jorath's ships are closing in on the signal. They're taking the bait. Evander felt a glimmer of hope. All right, everyone. Let's make some noise. The ship rocked as they powered up their weapons, ready to unleash a storm of energy and chaos. Jorath might have had superior numbers, but they had the element of surprise, and a particularly ornery AI. Time to crash the party, Leora said, her fingers dancing over the controls. Evander grinned, feeling the familiar thrill of impending mayhem. Let's give them a night to remember. The first shots rang out, bright bursts of energy that cut through the darkness of space like angry fireworks. Procyon's systems hummed with life, the ship's weaponry a blur of movement and light. Jorath's forces scrambled to react, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught. Evander could imagine the confusion aboard their ships, the panic as they realized they'd been led into a trap. Keep it up, Procyon, Evander urged, his voice steady despite the chaos. With pleasure, Captain, Procyon replied, its tone almost gleeful. As Jorath's ship struggled to regroup, Evander and Leora coordinated their attack, using every trick and maneuver at their disposal. It was a dance of destruction, a symphony of chaos that left their enemies reeling. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The Dominion ships floated in disarray, their systems compromised, their crews scrambling to make sense of the pandemonium. Now's our chance, Leora said, her voice a mix of exhaustion and triumph. Evander nodded, feeling the weight of their victory settle on his shoulders. Procyon, take us out of here, and make it fast. With pleasure, Procyon replied, the ship's engines roaring to life. As they slipped away into the vastness of space, Evander allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They'd pulled off the impossible, turned the tide against overwhelming odds. But he knew this was only a temporary reprieve. Jorath wouldn't give up so easily. Set a course for somewhere remote, he instructed, his voice carrying the weight of their uncertain future. Got any particular hellhole in mind? Leora asked, her tone light despite the gravity of their situation. Somewhere quiet, Evander replied. I've had enough explosions for one day. Procyon's voice crackled to life, its usual humor tempered with something like respect. Captain, you did it again. I'm almost impressed. Evander chuckled, the sound weary but genuine. Almost, huh? Guess I'll have to try harder next time. As they drifted through the void, the stars stretching endlessly before them, Evander couldn't help but smile. They'd faced impossible odds and come out the other side, battered but unbeaten. But he knew better than to let his guard down. The game was far from over. "Rest up while you can," he told Leora, his voice carrying a note of caution. "We've got a long road ahead." Leora nodded, her expression determined. "Wouldn't have it any other way, Captain." With a hum of engines and the distant echo of their recent battle fading into memory, the ship slipped away into the vastness of space, leaving chaos and the Dominion in their wake, a testament to the unyielding spirit of those who dared to defy the odds. As Evander leaned back, watching the stars blur past, he felt a sense of resolve settle over him. The Dominion might have had them on the ropes, but this fight was far from over. They'd play their last hand when the time was right. And when they did, it wouldn't be Jorath's victory dance that ended the night. As the dust settled from their escape, the crew of Procyon found themselves drifting in the relative calm of deep space. Relative being the operative word, of course. Because, as Evander Korth knew all too well, calm in their line of work was usually the calm before a shitstorm. "I think I'm beginning to hate space," Leora said, stretching her legs and cracking her knuckles with a satisfying pop. Evander leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. "Just beginning. I've been hating it since I first set foot on this glorified tin can." Procyon, the ship's AI, piped in with its usual dry wit. "And here I thought I was the life of the party." "You're more like the party crasher," Evander retorted. "Always showing up when things are about to get fun and ruining it with talk of impending doom and possible annihilation." Leora snorted. "He does have a point, Procyon. You do have a flair for the dramatic. Only because you lot insist on making me work under such suboptimal conditions," the AI shot back. "Frankly, I could do with a little less excitement." Evander chuckled, the sound rough and familiar. "Well, I guess we're all in the wrong line of work, aren't we?" "Speak for yourself," Leora mumbled, her gaze fixed on the monitors showing the chaotic aftermath of their little escapade. The Dominion's financial sectors were in complete disarray, and Evander couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. They'd managed to turn the Dominion's own vices against them, and now the ruling elite were scrambling like a bunch of drunk gamblers realizing they'd bet the farm. Evander let out a low whistle. "Looks like they've got themselves a proper mess." Leora grinned, flashing teeth that were a bit too sharp for comfort. "We did say we'd show them the folly of gambling addiction. And we delivered," Evander agreed. In spades, Procyon's holographic form appeared beside them, arms crossed, an expression one of faux seriousness. "I must admit, even I'm impressed. I thought they'd have caught on by now." "Never underestimate the power of human greed," Leora quipped. "Or stupidity. Or both," Evander added with a smirk. Their banter was interrupted by an alert flashing across the console. Evander's eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, studying the information. "Looks like Jorath's not quite done with us yet." Leora rolled her eyes. "Of course he isn't. I swear that man is like a cockroach. You just can't kill him." "It's his paranoia," Procyon supplied helpfully. "Keeps him alive, albeit insufferable." Evander grunted, fingers tapping on the armrest of his chair. "Yeah, well, let's hope his paranoia doesn't ruin our day. Or what's left of it," Leora muttered. Procyon flickered, the hologram's expression turning thoughtful. "Speaking of ruining days, our little stunt has destabilized the Dominion far more than anticipated." Evander sat up straighter, a glint in his eye. "Is that so?" "Oh, yes," Procyon confirmed. "Their financial network is crashing harder than a rookie pilot on his first planetary landing. There are riots in the streets, and the elite are scrambling to cover their losses." "Music to my ears," Leora said, her tone gleeful. Evander nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Sounds like it's time to press our advantage." "Agreed," Procyon said, "but we can't afford to get cocky. Jorath's still out there, and he's got a personal vendetta against you, Captain." Evander raised an eyebrow. "Against me? I'm shocked. Really? Hardly a surprise, Leora added dryly. You're not exactly his favorite person. Evander shrugged, unperturbed. The feeling's mutual. They spent the next few hours in tense anticipation, monitoring the fallout from their actions and waiting for Jorath to make his next move. It was a waiting game, one that Evander had played many times before, and he knew the stakes were higher than ever. Finally, Procyon's voice broke the silence. Captain, incoming transmission from Jorath's ship. He's requesting a parley. Parley? Leora repeated incredulously. Since when does Jorath want to talk? Probably since we made him look like an idiot, Evander guessed, a trace of satisfaction in his tone. Patch him through, Procyon. The air crackled with static as Jorath's image flickered to life on the main screen. His face was etched with anger and frustration, his eyes burning with the intensity of a man who'd been outplayed, and didn't like it one bit. Evander Korth, Jorath spat, his voice a low growl. You've been a thorn in my side long enough. You flatter me, Jorath, Evander replied, leaning back with deliberate nonchalance. To what do I owe the pleasure? Cut the crap, Jorath snapped. You've cost me a lot and you won't get away with it. Evander met his gaze, unflinching. I already have, Jorath, twice. Jorath's face twisted with barely restrained fury. This isn't over, Korth. Not by a long shot. You're right, Evander agreed, voice deceptively mild. It isn't over, but the question is, are you willing to lose even more? A flicker of uncertainty passed over Jorath's features, quickly masked by bravado. I'm not afraid of you or your little band of misfits. Evander's smile was all teeth. You should be. Jorath leaned forward, his expression hardening. This isn't a game, Korth. Funny, Evander said, tone light, because I'm having a hell of a time. Jorath's image flickered and cut out as he severed the transmission, leaving a tense silence in his wake. Evander exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. Well, that was fun. Leora shook her head. You really know how to push his buttons. Someone's got to, Evander replied with a shrug. And if it keeps him off balance, all the better for us. Procyon's holographic form reappeared, the AI expression serious. Captain, Jorath's forces are regrouping. They're making a push to stabilize the Dominion's financial sectors. Evander sighed, feeling the weight of their situation settle on him once more. Then it's time we remind them why they should be afraid of us. Any ideas? Leora asked, her tone hopeful. Evander considered their options, his mind racing. We hit them where it hurts, hard and fast. We need to make sure they can't recover. Procyon's eyes gleamed with mischief. I have just the thing in mind, Captain. If I can gain access to their core systems, I can trigger a widespread data wipe. Leora's eyes widened. You can do that, of course, Procyon said, a touch smug. But it'll be a one-shot deal. They'll lock me out after that. Evander nodded, feeling the familiar thrill of high-stakes risk. Then let's make it count. They worked in concert, the crew of Procyon functioning as one well-oiled machine. It was a dangerous gambit, but it was their only chance to end this once and for all. And as they prepared to strike, Evander couldn't help but feel a grim sense of satisfaction. Ready when you are, Captain, Procyon announced, its voice steady and determined. Do it, Evander said simply. The ship's systems hummed with energy as Procyon executed the hack, infiltrating the Dominion's core networks with the precision of a master thief. It was a silent assault, a digital tsunami sweeping through their systems and leaving chaos in its wake. Data wipe initiated, Procyon reported, its tone almost gleeful. They're blind, Captain. Evander allowed himself a moment of triumph, his voice carrying a note of finality. Let's get the hell out of here before they find their bearings. As Procyon navigated their escape, Leora's face broke into a wide grin. We did it. We actually did it. Evander couldn't suppress his own smile, the relief palpable. Don't get too comfortable. Jorath's still out there and he won't take this lying down. True, Leora agreed. But for now, we showed them what we're made of. Procyon's voice crackled to life, filled with respect and a hint of pride. Captain, you proved once again that humans are an unpredictable force of nature. Evander chuckled, the sound weary but content. And you've shown that even an AI can have a heart. With the Dominion in disarray and their foes reeling, Evander and his crew slipped away into the vast expanse of space, leaving a trail of chaos and confusion in their wake. It was a victory, hard-won and sweet, but Evander knew better than to rest on his laurels. Because in space, the only certainty was uncertainty. And the only guarantee was that the game was never truly over. Not until the last card was played and the final hand revealed the truth. And as the stars stretched out before them, endless and indifferent, Evander Korth felt a sense of resolve settle over him. The Dominion might have underestimated them once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. Not if Evander had anything to say about it. Evander Korth leaned back in his chair, feet propped up on the console, watching the stars streak past as the Procyon zipped through space. It was quiet now, at least quieter than the screaming chaos they'd left behind. You know, he mused aloud, for all the effort Joreth put into making my life hell, you'd think he'd be a bit better at it. Leora snorted, tapping on the control panel, her fingers a blur. He probably got a degree in Villainy 101 and skipped the advanced classes, not truly committed to the art. That's always been Joreth's problem, Procyon chimed in, its voice laced with digital sarcasm. A lack of follow-through, and possibly a lack of an actual functioning brain. Evander chuckled. Or an oversized ego compensating for other deficiencies. Sure you're talking about Joreth there, Captain. Leora shot him a sideways glance, one eyebrow raised. Evander's grin was all mischief. Touché. As they bantered, Procyon ran a diagnostic of the ship systems. Well, humans, I hope you're ready for the next chapter of this epic space opera, it said, voice dripping with irony. The Dominion's financial network is toast, and the cloning complex is free from their grip. Remind me again why we did this, Leora asked, half serious. Because it's mildly satisfying to watch rich assholes lose their shirts on the galactic craps table, Evander replied. And some would say justice, but mostly the first thing. Plus, now the clones have a shot at figuring out their own destinies, Procyon added, ever the optimist. Great, Leora said, rolling her eyes. Just what the universe needs, more people figuring out what to do with freedom. That always ends well. Evander sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Well, at least we get to play the heroes for a change. Wouldn't get used to it, Leora advised. Heroism's a fickle business. One minute you're a savior, the next you're the guy who ruined brunch. Procyon's holographic form flickered onto the bridge, looking like it had been programmed by a particularly sardonic software engineer. Good thing we never stick around for brunch. Saves on awkward conversations. Evander glanced at the monitors, now displaying the aftermath of their handiwork on Arcana's Prime. Seems the clones are organizing themselves pretty well, he observed. Without our meddling, I might add. Self-determination can be a powerful motivator, Procyon agreed. Though chaos is a close second. What about Joreth and the Dominions? Leora asked, leaning back in her chair, her combat boots crunching on some forgotten snack wrappers. They gonna come knocking again. Eventually, Evander replied with a shrug. But we've set them back a few years at least. Enough time for us to gain some distance and a bit of peace. Assuming we want peace, Leora pointed out. Adrenaline's a hell of a drug, true, Evander conceded. But I've had enough of looking over my shoulder for a while. Procyon tapped into the ship's sensors, the hologram's expression turning thoughtful. Besides, with the Dominion's tracking protocols in shambles, we're practically ghosts. It's liberating in a way. Huh, ghosts with a death wish, Leora muttered. Just how I like it. Evander stood, crossing his arms as he looked out at the stars. So what now? The universe is a big place and we've pissed off one of its nastier bullies. Explore, Procyon suggested. Find a new cause to champion, or just settle down somewhere quiet. Settle down, Leora repeated, incredulous. Do I look like someone who's ready for a white picket fence and a pet drone? Evander smiled, a genuine, albeit crooked, smile. Didn't think so. Besides, Procyon added, We've got a ship, a crew, and no one's actively trying to shoot us out of the sky at this exact moment. Seems like as good a time as any to see what else is out there. Guess I should be grateful we don't have a plan, Leora said with a wry grin. Plans are overrated. Agreed, Evander replied, clapping his hands together. Let's wing it. After all, it's worked out so far, right? Leora shrugged. More or less, but if we end up in a black hole, I'm blaming you. Fair, Evander acknowledged. But look on the bright side. At least it'll be a different kind of chaos. Procyon chuckled. If an AI could chuckle. And isn't that what life's all about in this neck of the universe? New chaos, fresh mistakes. Sounds like a tagline for our next adventure, Evander said, nodding thoughtfully. Procyon and crew, new chaos, fresh mistakes. Catchy, Leora agreed. Let's make sure not to embroider that on any uniforms. Evander watched as the ship sailed through the cosmos, the vastness of space stretching out before them. Guess we better get started then. On what? Leora asked. On whatever comes next, he replied, smirking. I'm sure we'll figure it out when we get there. Optimism from Captain Evander, Leora gave a mock gasp. The universe must be ending. Hopefully not before lunch, Evander quipped back. Procyon interrupted, a hint of amusement in its synthesized voice. Captain, I should inform you there's a nebula coming up, particularly fascinating if you're into that sort of thing. Evander's interest piqued despite himself. A safe nebula or the kind that eats ships for breakfast? Oh, definitely the breakfast kind, Procyon responded, far too cheerful for its own good. Leora rolled her eyes. Great, because nothing says freedom like willingly flying into a nebula that's bad for our health. What can I say? Evander shrugged. We like to live dangerously. That's one way of putting it, Leora muttered, shaking her head with a resigned smile. Procyon set a course, the ship's engines humming smoothly. Shall I calculate a path through, or should we rely on our usual method of hoping for the best? Bit of both, Evander replied, settling back into his chair with an air of contentment. After all, life's an adventure and we're all just trying not to get dead in the process. Comforting, Leora drawled. But let's try to avoid unnecessary detours into fiery death. Always, Evander assured her, though his eyes sparkled with mischief. But you know, if we happen to stumble into some treasure along the way, I won't complain. Procyon's hologram raised an eyebrow in an expression it must have borrowed from Evander. Treasure or trouble, you tend to mix those up. Hey, Evander protested, I've got my priorities straight, just. Sometimes those priorities are flexible. Flexible, Leora echoed, shaking her head. That's one way to justify it. The crew of the Procyon settled in for the journey, the ship slicing through the star-studded darkness like a knife through butter, or at least like a spaceship through space, which was close enough for analogies. As they approached the nebula, the colors swirling with a kind of ethereal beauty that belied its dangerous reputation, Evander felt a thrill of anticipation. Think we'll find anything interesting? If by interesting you mean lethal, Leora commented, then yes, probably. Always the pessimist, Evander teased. Realist, Leora corrected, though she couldn't hide the hint of a grin. Procyon's sensors pinged as they entered the nebula, vibrant hues casting shadows across the ship's interior, detecting fluctuations in the nebula's energy fields. Might make for a bumpy ride. Story of our lives, Evander said, settling into his chair and gripping the armrests. But hey, what's life without a little turbulence? You mean ongoing potential for disaster? Leora asked dryly. Couldn't tell you. Exactly. Evander grinned, watching as the nebula's colors flickered and danced around them, a cosmic light show with a distinctly dangerous edge. Let's see what surprises the universe has in store for us. Procyon's voice was steady, despite the ship's shuddering. Adjusting course to minimize exposure to gravitational disruptions. But I wouldn't get too comfortable, Captain. This place is a veritable storm of unpredictability. Just how we like it, Evander replied, his eyes on the shifting vistas outside. Keeps things interesting. Interesting or suicidal? Leora asked, holding onto her console as the ship rocked. Depends on your point of view, Evander said, giving her a wink. Personally, I'm leaning towards the former. Just remember, Procyon interjected, there's a fine line between adventurous and reckless. One involves not dying. Good advice, Evander conceded. I'll keep it in mind. They navigated the nebula's chaotic currents, Procyon deftly adjusting their path to avoid the worst of the turbulence. It was a delicate dance, and one Evander silently thanked the AI for handling. Remind me to buy you a drink when we find a habitable planet, Procyon, Evander said, appreciative. I'll take a firmware upgrade instead, Procyon quipped. Less hangover. Deal, Evander agreed, chuckling. As they finally emerged from the nebula's grip, the ship steadied and the stars once again filled their view. It was a sight that never failed to stir something deep within Evander, something akin to awe, though he'd never admit it. Back in the clear, Leora announced, sounding relieved. Still in one piece, miraculously. Miracles are for the weak, Evander said. We rely on skill. Sure, Leora said, shaking her head. Let's go with that. Procyon's sensors scanned the space ahead. Captain, I've detected an anomaly nearby. Might be worth investigating. Anomaly, huh? Evander raised an eyebrow. Good anomaly or bad anomaly? Unclear, Procyon replied. But it seems stable enough not to explode on contact. That's an improvement, Leora said dryly. Evander grinned, feeling the familiar itch of curiosity. Then let's take a look. After all, we're in the business of surprises, aren't we? Or disasters, Leora muttered, but there was a spark of interest in her eyes. Procyon plotted a course towards the anomaly, the ship accelerating smoothly. Let's see what you found for us, old universe, Evander said softly. Hopefully something worth the trouble. As they raced towards the unknown, the crew felt the thrill of the chase, the promise of discovery pushing them forward. It was why they were out here after all, to find the wonders hidden among the stars, to explore the boundaries of their own courage and curiosity. Here's to whatever comes next, Evander said, raising an imaginary glass in a toast to the cosmos. And to not getting blown up, Leora added. Their laughter echoed through the ship as they flew on, ready to face whatever the universe had to throw at them. For in the endless expanse of space, every day was an adventure, and every adventure was a story waiting to be told. And the story of Evander Korth and his crew was far from over.